Então, hoje eu estou estudando o módulo desse curso, Classic Solutions Architecture, soluções de arquitetura clássica para sistemas escaláveis na nuvem, especificamente na AWS, que é um conteúdo da prova para certificação de arquiteto de soluções. Então, estou dando continuidade ao vídeo anterior e agora nesse módulo aqui. Esse é um curso da Udemy que eu estou fazendo e eu estou no módulo 11, Classic Solutions Architecture Discussions. Então, vou mostrar aqui uma parte do slide. O vídeo eu não vou mostrar por causa do direito autoral, mas você pode comprar o curso do autor se você quiser assistir às aulas. E os slides eu posso eventualmente vou mostrar partes deles, mas nunca eles inteiros. Então vamos lá. Já separei um bloco de 1 hora para focar nesse tópico. Então vamos lá. Estou abrindo aqui o material. Só que não nesse computador que eu estou fazendo transmissão. Então, o slide vai ser esse daqui, que é o slide desse tópico, esse slide que está aqui no fundo. E eu vou abrir aqui também esse módulo. No final dele ele sempre tem um quiz, então eu já vou abrir aqui. Aí vocês já podem ir vendo um pouco do tipo de pergunta. Então esse o tópico vai ser soluções de arquitetura para desenvolver sistemas escaláveis utilizando cloud, especificamente utilizando recursos da AWS. Esse é um material para certificação de arquiteto de soluções da AWS, que, como eu falei mais cedo, é o que eu estou fazendo. É a certificação que eu estou fazendo, que eu estou estudando. E eu já possuo essa certificação aqui, que é a certificação a AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner. E eu estou com material aqui que tem algumas questões, perguntas e respostas. E nesse módulo, o tópico é o exemplo de como, da arquitetura desses sites aqui, whatsthetime.com, myclothes.com, mywordpress.com, entre outras soluções de arquitetura que estão demonstradas aqui nesses slides. Não se preocupa se você não souber inglês, tiver inglês aqui, não se preocupa que eu vou ler eles em português enquanto durante o vídeo. Então não se assusta com a linguagem. E eu não vou botar eles em português aqui porque eu estou aproveitando para praticar o meu inglês também. Aproveitando esse tempo que é bastante drasticamente limitado. Então eu tenho que aproveitar isso para praticar o meu inglês também. Então, vamos lá, eu estou abrindo aqui. Cadê? Em outra máquina.
This is the part I'm most proud of is, okay, no one does that. How do we look and how do we see how so far we've been learning all about individual technologies, but here we're going to learn how they fit together. And so we're going to view, so far we've been learning all about individual technologies. So far we've been learning all about individual, so far we've been learning all about individual technologies. But here, we're going to learn how they fit together. And so we're going to view solution architecture. So far we've been learning
Então o objetivo aqui é ir além de aprender algumas tecnologias individuais, mas mostrar como as várias tecnologias funcionam em conjunto.
Most proud of is, okay, no one does that. How do we look? So far we've been learning all about individual technologies, but here we're going to learn how they fit together. And so we're going to view solution architectures. Now this is, to me, the best part of this course. So really this is the part I'm most proud of is, okay, no one does that. How do we look and how do we see how these technologies all fit together, all work together into a solution architecture? So you need to be 100% comfortable with everything I'm going to explain in this section going into the exam, because this is pure solution architecture. So to discuss this, we'll be discussing basically how you can think of solution architecture overall iteratively through sample case studies. We'll see what is the time.com, myclothes.com, mywordpress.com,
Então aqui ele vai mostrar esses estudos de caso.
Applications quickly, and Beanstalk. So overall, it will be a natural progression. It will be increasingly complex, but hopefully it will give you some good perspective on EC2 versus ELB versus ASG versus EBS, EFS, RDS, Elastic Cache, all these kind of things, and Route 53, how all they fit together. Okay, that's it. Let's get started with solution architecture. Okay, so let's get started with our first solution architecture discussion. And I'm really excited because we're going to see so many different topics all together, and we'll really understand how they fit and what are the challenges we have as a solutions architect. So the first website is whatistime.com. And whatistime.com allows people to know.
Então, o primeiro exemplo aqui, esse site aqui, whattistime.com, que é um site que basicamente ele permite que as pessoas vejam que horas são, mas não poucas pessoas, né? Ele é um site escalável para pessoas no mundo inteiro conseguirem ver isso, e o site tem que estar sempre funcionando.
What time it is. I know it sounds stupid, but at least it's so easy that everyone understands it and will be able to talk
Mas é um
about
exemplo
it
que é
afterwards.
fácil de entender.
So we don't need a database because it's so simple. Each
Não tem banco de dados.
each server knows what time it is, and we want to start small. We're willing to accept downtime.
Ele pode começar pequeno,
maybe our app will get
pode
more and more
acessar,
popular. People really
suportar
want to know the time
algum
around the
downtime,
world, and so we'll need to scale vertically.
e ele deve
and horizontally.
poder
Maybe
escalar
remove
verticalmente e
downtime,
horizontalmente
and let's
sem
go through the
downtime.
solutions architect journey for this app. We'll see a lot of things on how we can proceed. So let's start really simple. Okay, let's start from the very beginning. You are a solution
Começar
architect,
pequeno,
and you
começar
say,
do
you know what would be
início.
great? You have a T2 micro instance and you have a user, and the user says what time it is, and say, okay.
Então vai
5:30
começar
p.m.
com
Done.
uma
This is my app.
instância
So we have a
T2,
public EC2 instance,
uma instância
and because we want to make
pública
the
do
EC2
EC2,
instance have a static IP, just in
e
case
que o
something
usuário vai
happens, I
poder
need to restart it,
acessar,
then I will attach an
fazer uma
elastic
pergunta,
IP address to it.
que horas
So this is
tem,
my
e vai
first
retornar a
POC.
hora.
It's working really great. Our users are able to access our application, and we're getting great feedback. So now what's happening is that our users are really having a good time using our application. So they said to their friends, hey, you should also use this application. So another friend comes in and says, what time is it? And 7:30 p.m. And another friend comes in, what time is it? 6:30 p.m. And so we realize here that our application is getting more and more traffic, and suddenly the T2 micro instance isn't enough. And so as a solution architect, we say, wait a minute, maybe we should replace that T2 micro instance by something a little bit bigger to handle the load. So that's called vertical scaling. Maybe we'll make it an M5 large type of instance. So what we do is that we stop the instance, we change the instance type.
Então, a partir desse único site em uma única instância do EC2, que o usuário vai acessar, vai perguntar qual é a hora e vai responder a hora para ele, aí ele já pode escalar para uma solução um pouco mais avançada, que aí já vão ter ele escalar verticalmente. E aí já vão ter vários usuários, e só que a solução, nesse caso, a solução simples, é basicamente utilizar uma instância EC2 com maior capacidade de memória e maior capacidade de processamento para suportar vários usuários. É uma forma de escalar bem simples.
And then we start again the instance, and here we go. This is an M5 type of instance. So what happened here is that it has the same public IP because it has an elastic IP address, so people are still able to access our application, but we have experienced downtime while upgrading to an M5. And so our users were not really happy. During that moment, they were not able to access our application. So this works, but this isn't great, right? So next, we're going really popular, and it's time to scale horizontally. So we get, remember, this application, M5 has one public IP, elastic IP attached to it, and now we're getting tons of users, and so they're all asking what time is it, and so now we want to scale horizontally, so we start
E
adding
essa
EC2
é a
instances,
escala
they're all
horizontal,
M5 large,
aumentar a
and they all
quantidade
have an
de
elastic IP
instâncias
attached to it.
do
So now on
EC2.
top of having 3 EC2 instances, we have 3 elastic IP, and so our users, they need to be aware of the exact values of these 3 elastic IP to talk to our instances. And so that's called horizontal scaling. We're doing not bad, but we start to reach some limits. Now the users need to be aware of more and more IPs, and we have to manage more infrastructure, and it's pretty tricky, right? So, okay, let's change the approach. Now we have 3 EC2 instances, and 5. And let's remove Elastic IP because it's something that we can't really manage. There's only 5 Elastic IP per region per account by default, so it's not a lot. And so instead our users
agora
what
uma
they're going to
solução
do
pouco mais
is that there are
avançada,
more and more IPs, and we have
para
to
poder
manage
suportar uma
more
quantidade cada
infrastructure
vez
and
maior, cada vez maior de
and
pessoas, de
5.
acesso.
And let's remove Elastic IP because it's something that we can't really manage. There's only 5. There is some limits. Now the users need to be aware of more and more IPs, and we have to the exact value Elastic IP attached to it. So now on top of having 3 EC2 instances, we have 3 Elastic IP, and so our users, they need to be aware of the exact values of these 3 Elastic IP to talk to our instances. And so that's called horizontal scaling. We're doing not bad, but we start to reach some limits. Now the users need to be aware of more and more IPs, and we have to manage more infrastructure, and it's pretty tricky, right? So, okay, let's change the approach. Now we have 3 EC2 instances and 5, and let's remove Elastic IP because it's something that we can't really manage. There's only 5 Elastic IP per region per account by default, so it's
Nessa
not a
opção
lot.
aqui, ele
And
tira o
so
Elastic IP
instead our users, what they're going to do is that they're going to leverage Route 53.
e
So we
começa
set up
utilizando
Route
o
53,
Routing 53.
and the website URL is api.whatisTime.com. And we've decided it's going to be an A record with a TTL of 1 hour. And A record means that from a DNS like this, it's going to give me a list of IPs. So remember, Route 53, A record is IP. So great, so the users query Route 53 and then they get...
Então o Route 53, Route 53, ele vai oferecer um DNS onde os usuários vão acessar o domínio api.whatisThetime.com. A API tá vendo que esse site tá no ar? Ou se api.whatisThetime.com. Pode ser um site antigo ou um site antigo que não existe mais, ou pode ser um exemplo fictício, mas existem sites que de fato fazem exatamente isso e que escalam. Mas voltando aqui, o usuário vai ficar sabendo o endereço do IP através do DNS do Route 53.
Gets the IP addresses of our EC2 instances, and they can change over time. It doesn't really matter because Route 53 will get updated. We'll update it and keep it in sync. And so our users are now able to access our EC2 instances, and we don't have any Elastic IP to manage anymore. So using Route 53, we've done some good improvements. But what happens is that now we want to be able to scale, and be able to add and remove instances on the fly. And so when we do remove an instance, what happens? Well, it seems like these users on the top, they were talking to this M5 large instance, but now it's gone. And it turns out that if they do a Route 53 query, because the TTL was 1 hour, they're using the same response for 1 hour. So for 1 hour, they'll try to connect to that instance, and that instance is gone. And so here it's not really great because even though these users are having a good time, and maybe after 1 hour, these users will be able to connect to these 2 instances, they're not having a good time right now because they think that our application is down, and that's really, really bad. So, okay, so this is an architecture and we see the limit of it. So how can we push this a little bit further? So let's talk about adding a load balancer. So instead, now we don't have public instances anymore. We have private EC2 instances, and we're going to launch them in the...
E agora, mais uma alteração. Aqui o exemplo, adicionando, removendo instâncias. Aí chega uma parte que já escala um pouco mais, que é a parte de insere um load balancer, que é o ELB, o Elastic Load Balancer. É o balanceamento de carga.
The same availability zone because we don't know any better. So we've launched them manually. We have 3 and 5 large instances, and we are following this course, and we said, okay, let's use a load balancer. And you know what? On top of it, it's going to have health checks, such as if one instance is down or not working, at least we won't send traffic from our users to the instance. So, okay, we're linking the 2 together. So my ELB is going to be public facing, whereas my private EC2 instances are in the back. And so they restrict traffic between these 2 using maybe a security group rule that we've seen before, using security group as a reference. Okay, that sounds pretty good. So now our users, they're going to query for whatisThetime.com. But this time, it cannot be a record because a load balancer has this API changing all the time. And so instead, because it's a load balancer, we can use an alias record. And this alias record is perfect because it will point from Route 53 to the ELB and everything will work really great. And so here we change the DNS, but now the users connect to our load balancer and our load balancers redirects us to our EC2 instances and balances the traffic out. And it's really great because now we can add and remove these instances and register them with a load balancer, and we won't have any downtime for our users thanks to the health checks feature. So really, really good. But now adding and removing instances manually is pretty hard to do. So what about we just leverage something we just learned in this class and we'll launch an auto-scaling group. So now we have our API on the left-hand side, it's the same thing, Route 53, ELB, but on the right-hand side now, we're going to have an availability zone and we're going to launch private EC2 instances, but this time they're going to be managed by an auto-scaling group. And so this allows our...
Essa parte aqui ele está separando em diferentes security groups, separando o Elastic Load Balancer.
Auto-scaling group to basically scale on demand. Maybe in the morning, no one wants to know the time. Maybe at night, when people want to leave work, they want to know the time. So we're able to scale based on the demand, scale in and scale out. And this is really, really great because now we have an application, no downtime, auto-scaling, load balanced. It seems like a really stable architecture, and it is. But what happens is that there's an earthquake that happens and availability 1 goes down.
Assim ele não vai ter downtime, porque vai estar sempre escalando. O Elastic Load Balancer vai estar sempre escalando aqui, aumentando, diminuindo a quantidade de acordo com a demanda. Tem o Security Group, que vai estar protegendo. O Security Group ele age como um firewall das instâncias S2. Vão ter as instâncias privadas. E aí o Route 53 fazendo a parte do DNS. Aí na aula que ele fala, e o que acontece se por acaso tiver um terremoto e destruir o data center que esse site está hospedado? O site vai sair do ar? Nessa versão, sim.
So the one goes down and guess what? Our
Mas
application
como
is entirely
resolver
down.
isso?
Our users are not happy. And so Amazon comes to us and says, yes, it's because you haven't implemented a multi-AZ application and we recommend you to implement multi-AZ to
Que essa
be highly
solução
available.
aqui
So,
de
okay, we say, all right,
múltiplas zonas de
change a little bit the
disponibilidade.
things. Now we're going to have to ELB, and on top of having health checks, it's also going to be multi-AZ, and it's going to be launched on AZ 1, 2, 3. So 3 AZs for this ELB, and our auto-scaling group as well is going to span across multiple AZ, and this allows us maybe to have 2 instances
Nessa
in
solução
AZ1,
aqui,
2 instances in AZ2,
ele-
and 1 instance in AZ3.
Ele pode
So the cool thing now is that
espalhar as
great,
instâncias
like,
C2
if
por
AZ1 goes
múltiplas
down,
zonas
we'll
de
still have AZ2
disponibilidade.
and AZ3 to serve our traffic to our users, and we've effectively made our app multi-AZ and highly available and resilient to failure. Pretty awesome, right? Okay, how far can we go with this? Let's keep on going. So we have 2 AZ, and we know that at least 1 instance will be running in each AZ. So why don't we reserve capacity? Why don't we start basically diminishing the cost of our application? Because we know that for sure.
E aqui para reduzir custo, nós podemos reservar instâncias do EC2 com quantidades mínimas de capacidade, que é o mínimo que nós precisaríamos para manter o serviço funcionando, já deixar isso reservado, que isso é mais barato do que você contratar de acordo com a demanda. Se você, por exemplo, você sabe que o sistema ele vai espera-se que ele vai ficar no ar por 1 ano, por 3 anos, você pode pagar com antecedência a instância reservada, que é mais barato do que você pagar sob demanda.
2 instances must be running at all time during the year. And so by reserving instance, maybe for the minimum capacity of our auto-scaling group, then we're going to save a lot of cost in the future. Whereas the new instances that get launched, maybe they're going to be temporary, so on-demand is fine. Or if we're a bit crazy, we can even use spot instances for less cost, but we might have the instances being terminated. And so it's really interesting, right? Because we've seen an architecture going from a very small application all the way to a load balance, autoscaling group, multi-AZ, health checks, reserved instances type of application. And so to me, that's, as a solutions architect, your journey. It's up to understand what are the requirements and what should we architect in returns to these requirements. And this is what the exam will test you. Now, this is the first architecture discussion. Trust me, there will be many others in the next lecture. But for now, let's just review what we've discussed. What we've discussed.
Então, só nesse simples exemplo, passamos por IP privado, IP público, instância da EC2, IP elástico, Route 53, Load Balancer, TTL do Route 53, A-Record, Alias Record, Autoscale Group, múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade para resistência a desastres, Health Check do LB e regras de segurança, regras de Security Group e reservas de capacidade para redução de custo.
For example, what it is for an institute instance to have a public IP and a private IP. Where does it fit in our architecture diagram? We've also seen what is the benefit of having an elastic IP versus using Route 53 versus maybe using a load balancer for our application. We've also seen that because of the Route 53 TTL, we couldn't really use A records, so we had to use a load balancer and alias record. And so that would be able to see how Route 53 can fit in this whole picture. We've seen how to maintain EC2 instances manually, and then we say, well, it's too much maintenance, let's use autoscaling groups. And you know what? It's actually going to provide us even better costing because it'll just scale on demand and we'll just have the perfect amount of EC2 instances at any time. And then we said, okay, let's go into multi-AZ. We can survive disasters this way. And let's enable ELB health checks so that only the instances that are correctly responding do get traffic. And we've seen how to set up security group rules so that the EC2 instances would only receive traffics coming from the ELB. And finally, we said, you know what, let's look at capacity, let's do some cost saving. We always know that we want 2 EC2 instances running at any time, so let's reserve these instances and that will bring lots of cost savings. So that's it. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture. Okay, so in the past lecture, we were in a stateless type of web application. What is the time.com? Just answer the time, and we didn't need any database or any information, external information, to answer that question. But now we're going to get into a stateful web application called myclothes.com. And myclothes.com allows people to buy clothes online. And there's a shopping cart when you navigate myclothes.com. And we're having hundreds of users at the same time. So all these users are navigating the website. And we want to be able to scale, maintain horizontal scalability, and keep our application web tier as stateless as possible. So even though there's a state of shopping cart, we want to be able to scale our web application as easily as possible. So users, that means that they should not lose their shopping cart while navigating our website. That would be really bad. And maybe also have their details such as address, etc., in a database that we can store effectively and make accessible from anywhere. So let's see how we can proceed. You'll see it's going to be yet another fun but challenging discussion. Okay, so this is our application, and I'm going to go fast. Here's the kind of architecture we've seen in the previous lecture. So we have our user, Route 53, multi-AZ ELB, autoscaling group, 3AZ, very basic. So our application is accessing our ELB, and our ELB says, all right, you're going to talk to this instance. And you create a shopping cart, and then the next request is going to go not to the same instance, but to another instance. And now the shopping cart is lost. And the user says, oh, there must just be a little bug. I'm going to try again. So he adds something to the shopping cart, and it gets redirected to the third instance, which doesn't have the shopping cart. So basically, the user is going crazy and say, wait, I'm losing my shopping cart every time I do something. This is really weird. myclothes.com is a bad website. I don't want to shop on it. It will lose money. So how do we fix this? Well, we can introduce stickiness or session affinity. And that's an ELB feature, so we enable ELB stickiness. And now our user talks to our first instance, adds something into the shopping cart, and then the second request goes to the same instance because of stickiness, and the third request also goes to the same instance, and actually every request will go to the same instance because of stickiness. This works really well, but if an EC2 instance gets terminated for some reason, then we still lose our shopping cart. But there is definitely some kind of improvement here thanks to stickiness and session affinity. So now let's look at the completely different approach and introduce user cookies. So basically, instead of having the EC2 instances store the content of the shopping cart, let's say that the user is the one storing the shopping cart content. And so every time it connects to the load balancer, it basically is going to say, by the way, in my shopping cart, I have all these things. And that's done through web cookies. So now if it talks to the first server, the second server, or the third server, each server will know what the shopping cart content is because the user is the one sending the shopping cart content directly into our EC2 instances. So it's pretty cool, right? We achieved statelessness because now each EC2 instance doesn't need to know what happened before. The user will tell us what happened before. But the HTTP requests, they're getting heavier. So because we send a shopping cart content in web cookies, we're sending more and more data every time we add something into our shopping cart. Additionally, there's some level of security risk because the cookies, they can be altered by attackers maybe, and so maybe our user may have a modified shopping cart all of a sudden. So when we do have this kind of architecture, make sure that your EC2 instances do validate the content of the user cookies. And then the cookies overall, they can only be so big, they can only be less than 4 kilobytes total. So there's only a little information you can store in the cookies. You cannot store big data sets, okay? So this is the idea. So this works really well. This is actually a pattern that many web application frameworks use, but what if we do something else? Let's introduce this concept of server session. So now instead of sending a whole shopping cart in web cookies, we're just going to send a session ID. That is just this one for the user. So we're going to send this, and in the background, we're going to have maybe an Elasticache cluster. And what will happen is that when we send a session ID, we're going to talk to an EC2 instance and say we're going to add this thing to the cart. And so the EC2 instance will add the cart content into the Elasticache, and the ID to retrieve this cart content is going to be the session ID. So when our user basically does a second request with a session ID and it goes to another EC2 instance, that other EC2 instance is able, using that session ID, to look up the content of the cart from Elasticache and retrieve that session data. And then for last request, the same pattern. The really cool thing with Elasticache, remember, it is sub-millisecond performance, so all these things happen really quickly, and that's really great. An alternative, by the way, for storing session data, we haven't seen it yet, it's called DynamoDB, but I'm just putting it out here just in case you know what DynamoDB is. So it's a really cool pattern here. It's more secure because now Elasticache is a source of truth and no attackers can change what's in Elasticache. So we have a much more secure type of pattern, and it is very common. So now, okay, we have Elasticache, we figured this out. We want to store user data in a database. So we want to store the user address. So again, we're going to talk to our EC2 instance, and this time it's going to talk to an RDS instance. And the RDS is going to be great because it's for long-term storage, and so we can store and retrieve user data, such as address, name, etc., directly by talking to RDS. And each of our instances can talk to RDS, and we effectively get, again, some kind of multi-AZ stateless solution. So our web traffic is going great. Our website is doing amazing, and now we have more and more users, and we realize that most of the thing they do is they navigate the website. They do reads, they get product information, all that kind of stuff.
Resumindo,
so how do we scale read?
Resumindo tudo que ele falou aqui, o próximo exemplo que ele mostrou aqui é o mycloths.com, que é um site para as pessoas comprarem roupas online, que ele tem um carrinho de compras. Esse site vai ter milhares de usuários simultâneos e precisa escalar mantendo escalabilidade horizontal e manter a aplicação web o mais stateless possível. Usuários não podem perder os seus carrinhos de compras e usuários devem ter os seus detalhes, como endereço e tudo mais, em um banco de dados.
Okay, so in the past lecture, we were in a stateless type of web application. What is a time.com? Just enter the time, and we didn't need a database or any information, external information to answer that question. But now we're going to get into a stateful web application called myclothes.com. And myclothes.com allows people to buy clothes online. And there's a shopping cart when you navigate myclothes.com. And we're having hundreds of users at the same time, so all the users are navigating the website. And we want to be able to scale, maintain horizontal scalability, and keep our application web tier as stateless as possible. So even though there's a state of shopping cart, we want to be able to scale our web application as easily as possible. So users, that means that they should not lose their shopping cart while navigating our website. That would be really bad. And maybe also have their details such as address, etc., in a database that we can store effectively and make accessible from anywhere. So let's see how we can proceed. You'll see it's going to be yet another fun but challenging discussion. Okay, so this is our application, and I'm going to go fast. Here's the kind of architecture we've seen in the previous lecture. So we have our user, RPD3, multi-AZ ELB, auto-scaling group 3AZ, very...
Então já começa aqui com o Elastic Load Balancer. E já começa com o Elastic Load Balancer, utilizando o Route 53 como DNS, como no final do exemplo anterior. Ele usa o Elastic Load Balancer, múltiplas instâncias do EC2 e o Autoscale Group, incluindo essas instâncias, e as instâncias EC2 elas são espalhadas por múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade, como para alta disponibilidade, para resistência em caso de desastres que danifiquem um dos data centers. É uma das zonas de disponibilidade, no caso.
Very basic. So our application is accessing our ELB, and our ELB says, all right, you're going to talk to this instance. And you create a shopping cart, and then the next request is going to go not to the same instance, but to another instance. Now the shopping cart is lost, and the user says, oh, there must just be a little bug. I'm going to try again. So he adds something to the shopping cart, and it gets redirected to the third instance, which doesn't have the shopping cart. So basically, the user is going crazy and say, wait, I'm losing my shopping cart every time I do something. This is really weird. myclothes.com is a bad website. I don't want to shop on it. It will lost money. So how do you fix this? Well, we can introduce stickiness or session affinity, and that's an ELB feature, so we enable ELB stickiness, and now our user talks to our first instance, adds something into the shopping cart, and then the second shopping cart is lost, and the user says, oh, there must just be a little bug. So this is our application, and I'm going to go fast. Here's the kind of architecture we've seen in the previous lecture. So we have our user, RPD3, multi-AZ ELB, auto-scaling group 3AZ, very basic. So our application is accessing our ELB, and our ELB says, all right, you're going to talk to this instance, and you create a shopping cart, and then the next request is going to go not to the same instance, but to another instance. Now the shopping cart is lost, and the user says, oh, there must...
Então, essa solução teria um pequeno problema, que quando o usuário começa a adicionar as coisas num carrinho de compras e está em uma instância, depois quando ele vai consultar em outra instância, ele pode já perder o carrinho dele. Então, qual a solução para esse problema?
I'm going to try again. So he adds something to the shopping cart, and it gets redirected to the third instance, which doesn't have the shopping cart. So basically, the user is going crazy and say, wait, I'm losing my shopping cart every time I do something. This is really weird. myclothes.com is a bad website. I don't want to shop on it. It will lost money. So how do we fix this? Well, we can introduce stickiness or session affinity, and that's it.
Então, a solução para isso é o stickiness, ou afinidade de sessão,
feature, so we enable ELB stickiness.
que é uma funcionalidade do Elastic Load
Our
Balancer.
user talks to our first instance, adds something into the shopping cart, and then the second request goes to the same instance because of stickiness, and the third request also goes to the same instance. And actually, every request will go to the same instance because of stickiness. This works really well, but if an EC2 instance gets terminated for some reason, then we still lose our shopping cart. But there is definitely some kind of improvement here thanks to stickiness and session.
Dessa forma, todas as requisições do mesmo usuário eles vão ser para a mesma instância do EC2.
Affinity. So now let's look at a completely different approach and introduce user cookies. So basically, instead of having the EC2 instances store the content of the shopping cart, let's say that the user is the one storing the shopping cart content. And so every time it connects to the load balancer, it can say, by the way, in my shopping cart, I have all these things, and that's done through web cookies. So now if it talks to the first server, the second server, or the third server, each server will know what the shopping cart content is because the user is the one sending the shopping cart content directly into our EC2 instances. So it's pretty cool, right? We achieve statelessness because now each EC2 instance doesn't need to know what happened before. The user will tell us what happened before. But the HTTP requests, they're getting heavier. So because we send the shopping cart content in web cookies, we're sending more and more data every time we add something into our shopping cart. Additionally, there's some level of security risk because the cookies, they can be altered by attackers maybe, and so maybe our user may have a modified shopping cart all of a sudden. So when we do have this kind of architecture, make sure that your EC2 instances do validate the content of the user cookies. And then the cookies overall, they can only be so big, they can only be less than 4 kilobytes total. So there's only a little information you can store in the cookies, you cannot store big data sets, okay? So this is the idea. So this works really well, it's actually a
Outra solução que ele mostra aqui é através de cookies.
pattern that many web application frameworks use, but what if we do something else? Let's introduce the concept of server session. So now instead of sending a whole shopping cart in web cookies, we're just going to send a session ID that is just this one for the user. So we're going to send this.
Outra solução são sessões, enviar session ID em web cookies.
And in the background, we're going to have to be an Elastic Cache cluster. And
E no background disso, ele coloca aqui um Elastic Cache. Um Elastic Cache para armazenar e buscar os dados de sessão.
what happens is that when we send a session ID,
E uma alternativa ao Elastic Cache é o DynamoDB.
we're going to talk to each instance and say we're going to add this into the cart. And so that each instance will add the cart content into the Elastic Cache, and the ID to retrieve this cart content is going to be the session ID. So when our user basically does a second request with a session ID and it goes to another EC2 instance, that other EC2 instance is able, using that session ID, to look up the content of the cart from Elasticache and retrieve that session data. And then for last request, the same pattern. The really cool thing with Elasticache, remember, it is sub-millisecond performance, so all these things happen really quickly, and that's really great. An alternative, by the way, for storing session data, we haven't seen it yet, it's called DynamoDB. They're just putting it out here just in case you know what DynamoDB is. So it's a really cool pattern here. It's more secure because now Elasticache is a source of truth, and no attackers can change what's in Elasticache, so we have a much more secure type of pattern, and it's very common. So now, okay, we have Elasticache, we figured this out. We want to store user data in the database. We want to store the user address. So again, we're going to talk to our EC2 instance, and this time it's going to talk to an RDS instance. And an RDS
Aqui é uma solução de armazenar os dados do usuário em um banco de dados utilizando RDS.
RDS is going to be great because it's for long-term storage, and so we can store and retrieve user data, such as address.
Para armazenar dados de longo prazo, como endereço, nome, dados do usuário em geral, não dados temporários.
Name, etc., directly by talking to RDS. And each of our instances can talk to RDS, and we effectively get, again, some kind of multi-AZ stateless solution. So our web traffic is doing great. Our website is doing amazing, and now we have more and more users, and we realize that most of the thing they do is they navigate the website. They do reads, they get product information, all that kind of stuff. So how do we scale reads? Well, we can use an RDS master, which tends to write, but we can also have RDS read replicas with some replication happening. And so anytime we read stuff, and we can read from replicas, and we can have up to 15 in RDS, and it will allow us to scale.
Mas como é que vai fazer se tiver uma quantidade muito grande de instâncias da EC2 que foram escaladas, uma quantidade muito grande, milhões de usuários, uma quantidade muito grande de instâncias da EC2 e todas acessando o mesmo banco de dados, todas consultando os dados do usuário no mesmo banco de dados. E, será que o banco de dados vai suportar isso? Isso pode sobrecarregar, pode derrubar o banco de dados. Então, como que nós vamos resolver esse problema? Então, a solução aqui é utilizar os READ réplicas, que são a replicação de bancos de dados, utilizando um serviço, um recurso do RDS, que são os READ réplicas. Você pode criar várias réplicas de somente leitura, que são várias instâncias do seu banco de dados, onde ele pode escalar para essas diversas instâncias da EC2, fazer a leitura em réplicas diferentes do banco de dados.
Scale the reads of our RDS database. There's another alternative called lazy loading, where we use the cache. And so the way it works is that our user talks to your EC2 instance, it looks in the cache and says, do you have this information? If it doesn't have it, then it's going to read from RDS and put it back into Elasticache, so just the information is cached. And so the other EC2 instances are doing the same thing, but this time
Tem outra solução também, que é ler do cache.
they talk to Elasticache, they will have that information and they get the cache hits, and so they directly get the response right away because it's been cached. And so this pattern allows us to do less traffic on RDS, basically decrease the CPU usage on RDS and improve performance at the same time. But we need to do cache maintenance stuff, and it's a bit more difficult, and again, this has to be done application side. So pretty awesome, now we have our application, it's scalable, it has many reads, but we want to survive disasters. We don't want to be stricken by disasters. So how do we do? Our user talks.
E aqui, mais uma alternativa, é a solução de múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade, o RDS, RDS e o Elastic Cache espalhado por múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade, que é a questão de resistência à tolerância a falhas.
So our Route 53, but now we have multi-AZ ELD. And by the way, Route 53 is already highly available, you don't need to do anything. But so for a load balancer, we're going to make it multi-AZ. Our autoscaling group is multi-AZ, and then RDS, there's a multi-AZ feature. The other one's going to be a standby replica, that can just take over whenever there's a disaster. And Elasticache also has a multi-AZ feature if you use Redis. So really cool. Now we basically have a multi-AZ application all across the board, and we know for sure that we can survive an availability zone in AWS going down. Now for security groups, we want to be super secure, so maybe we'll open HTTPS traffic from anywhere on the ALD side. For the EC2 instance side, we just want to restrict traffic coming from the load balancer, and maybe for Elasticache, we just want to restrict traffic coming from the EC2 security group, and from RDS, same thing, we want to restrict traffic coming directly from the EC2 security group. So that's it. So now let's just talk about this architecture for our web application. So we have this. ELD DP sessions, web client for storing cookies and making our web app stateless, or using a session ID and a session cache, specifically using Elasticache, and as an alternative, we can use DynamoDB. We can also use Elasticache to cache data from RDS in case of reads, and we can use multi-AZ to be surviving disasters. RDS, we can use it for storing user data, so more durable type of data. Read replicas can be used for scaling reads, or we can also use Elasticache, and then we have multi-AZ for disaster recovery. And on top of it, we added tight security for security groups referencing each other. So,
aqui resumo de tudo. Elastic Cache para armazenar as sessões, DynamoDB como alternativa, para fazer o cache de dados do RDS, múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade, RDS para armazenar dados do usuário, read réplicas para escalar o banco de dados e multi-AZ para múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade para recuperação de desastres, segurança utilizando security groups, ELB stick sessions e clientes web para armazenar cookies e fazer aplicações web stateless.
So this is a more complicated application. There's 3 tiers because there's the web tier, the client tier, the web tier, and the database tier. But this is a very common architecture overall. And yes, it may start to increase in cost, but it is okay. At least we know the trade-offs we're making. If we want multi-AZ, yes, for sure we have to pay more. If we want to scale the reads, yes, for sure we'll have to pay more as well. But it gives us some good trade-offs and architecture decisions that we have to make. So I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture. Okay, so yet another stateful web application, and we're going to name this mywordpress.com. So here we're trying to create a fully scalable WordPress website. And WordPress is a very, very common way of creating a website. It's very
E esse mywordpress.com é um WordPress, um site WordPress totalmente escalável.
popular. There's posting WordPress available, but people like to deploy WordPress on AWS. And so we want to access that website, and we want to correctly display picture uploads. So the way it works, that WordPress will store the pictures somewhere on some drive, and basically all your instances must access that data as well. We'll see this in the solution architecture discussions anyway. And so our user data, the blog content, and everything should be stored in the MySQL database, and we want it to scale globally. So let's see how we can achieve this. So
Então ele vai mostrar aqui no próximo slide a arquitetura para fazer um site WordPress ser escalável globalmente para ser acessado por milhões de usuários ao redor do mundo inteiro. E tem como restrição, os dados precisam ser armazenados no MySQL. E o site precisa ser capaz de acessar e exibir as imagens de upload, imagens que foram enviadas para o site corretamente.
the first thing we have to do is to create a layer that has RDS. So we are now very familiar with this kind of architecture. With RDS in the backend, it's multi-A.
Aqui a arquitetura básica, que é a última do exemplo anterior, é o Route 53, fazendo o trabalho de DNS, um Elastic Load Balancer, para balanceamento de carga, múltiplas instâncias da S2, no Autoscale Group, instâncias espalhadas por múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade para resistência a desastre e o banco de dados RDS também em múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade.
Is used to configure all my S2 instances. But what if I just want to go big and really scale up? Maybe I want to replace this layer with Aurora, MySQL, and I can have multi-AZ.
O banco de dados pode ser substituído pelo MySQL no Aurora, com múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade e réplicas de leitura.
Replicas using global databases if I wanted to. But here we're just basically getting less operations by using Aurora. It's just a choice I'm making as a solution architect. You don't have to make that choice. But I like Aurora. I like the fact that it scales better, and I like the fact that it is easier to operate. Okay, excellent. So now let's talk about storing images. So let's go back to the very simple solution architecture when we have one EC2 instance and it has one EBS volume attached to it, so it's in one AZ. And so we're connected to our load balancer.
A solução para o armazenamento de imagem. Route 53, como sempre, envia a imagem para o Elastic Load Balancer com múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade. Em cada zona de disponibilidade, ele vai ser armazenado num volume EBS.
And so a user wants to send an image to our load balancer, and that image makes it all the way through
Ele envia a imagem para o Load Balancer, ele faz todo o
EBS. So the
caminho
image is stored on EBS. Now it's
até
we
ser
have one EBS
armazenado
instance,
no
and so it goes straight
EBS.
to the EBS volume, and we're happy. If we want to read that image, same thing. The image can be read from the EBS volume and sent back to the user. So very good, right? The problem arises when we start scaling. So now we have two EC2 instances in two different AZ, and each of these EC2 instances have their own EBS volumes. And so what happens is that if I send an image right here,
E aqui cada instância vai precisar ter o seu volume EBS. Isso acaba sendo um problema, né? Vai ter volumes EBS em várias zonas de disponibilidade. Então, qual a solução para evitar ter que ficar repetindo tantos EBS em tantas zonas de disponibilidade?
in this instance, and it gets stored on that EBS volume. If I want to read that image, maybe I'll make it this way, and yes, I can read it. Or, very common mistake, maybe I can read that image, and we'll go here. And here on the bottom, there's no image present, and so because it's not the same EBS volume, and so here I won't be able to access my image. And so that's really, really bad. So the problem with ES volumes is that it works really well when you have one instance, but when you start scaling across multiple AZ or multiple instances, then it's starting to become problematic. So for this, with CNX and how to store it, basically, we can use EFS. So let's use the exact same architecture, but now
Aí a solução é utilizar o EFS, que é Elastic File System,
EFS, Network File System Drive. So EFS is NFS.
que ele pode ser acessado por múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade.
And so EFS basically creates ENIs for Elastic Network Interface, and it creates these ENIs into each AZ, and this
E ele se conecta aos ENIs, que são Elastic Network Interfaces, são como placas de rede.
ENI can be used for all our EC2 instances to access our EFS drive. And the really cool thing here is that the storage is shared between all the instances. So if we send an image to the M5 instance, to the ENI, to EFS, so the image is stored in EFS, and if we want to read the image, it goes all the way to the bottom, and to the ENI, and it's going to read on EFS, and yes, EFS has that image available, so we can send it back. And so this is a very common way of scaling website storage across many different EC2 instances to allow them all to have access to the same file, regardless of their availability zone and how many instances we have. So that's it, that's like a little subtlety for WordPress, but I want to discuss EDS versus EFS. So we talked about Aura database to basically have less operations and have multi-AZ and replicas. And we talked about storing data in EDS, which works great when we're in a single instance application, but it doesn't work really great when we have many. And so maybe we can use EFS then to have a distributed application across multi-AZ and that kind of stuff. Now the costing aspect of it is that EDS is cheaper than EFS, but we do get a lot of advantages by using EFS, especially in this kind of use cases. So again, it's up to you as a solution architect to really understand the trade-offs you're doing and why you're doing things and the cost implications of what you're doing. So I hope that was helpful in this lecture, and I will see you in the next lecture. So a very quick lecture on instantiating.
E aqui é uma solução para instanciar aplicações rapidamente. Porque quando lançamos uma stack completa com EC2, com EBS, com RDS, leva tempo para instalar aplicações, iniciar ou recuperar os dados iniciais, configurar tudo, lançar a aplicação. Mas nós podemos usar as vantagens da nuvem para acelerar isso. Como que nós podemos fazer isso?
So in all the architecture discussions that we've had, we have never really talked about how do we install and deploy this application onto our EC2 instances to basically run our websites. And so when you launch a full stack, it can take a lot of time to install applications, insert or recover data, configure everything, and then launch the application. So how can we speed that up? So we can use the advantage of the cloud to speed that up. So let's have a look. For EC2 instances, we can use what's called a golden AMI. And golden AMI means that you install your applications, your OS dependencies, etc., everything beforehand, and then you create an AMI from it. And then for the future EC2 instances, you just launch them directly from this golden AMI. And the reason we do this is that we don't have to reinstall the applications, the OS dependencies, etc. We can just launch with everything already installed and ready to go. And that's the fastest way we can start up our EC2 instance. So golden AMI is a very common pattern in the cloud to have. And also we see how to use user data, so EC2 user data, and it allows us to bootstrap our instance. Bootstrapping means basically configuring the instance when it first starts. And so bootstrapping can also be done to install application, OS dependencies, etc. But this is going to be very slow, and we don't want each application to do, each EC2 instance to do the exact same thing the other one did if it can be repeated. But for dynamic configuration, for example, maybe retrieving the URL for our database and the password, etc., we can use bootstrapping using the EC2 user data. And so we can basically have a hybrid mix of a golden AMI and EC2 user data to make it work. And this is something we'll see in a second using Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk uses the same principle of the hybrid, where we configure an AMI and then we add on some user data. Okay, so for RDS databases, we can restore from snapshots, and then the database will have the schemas and data ready, which is much better than maybe running a big insert statement that will take from.
Algumas soluções, restaurar para o banco de dados, restaurar de snapshot com os esquemas e os dados do banco de dados pronto. Volumes EBS é a mesma coisa, restaurar os volumes de um disco que já foi formatado, já tem os dados. E para as instâncias EC2 tem o Golden AMI, que ele vai instalar suas aplicações, dependências e tudo que você precisa para lançar sua instância EC2. Você pode fazer o bootstrap usando user data, usar user data scripts e o híbrido dos dois, do AMI com user data. E você pode utilizar o Elastic Beanstalk.
Forever to start our RDS database. That's maybe a way to go quicker when you want to retrieve data. And EDS volumes, we can restore from a snapshot. We don't have to have the disk that's empty and not formatted. We can retrieve from a snapshot, and the snapshot will already be formatted properly and have the data we need. So these are the things you need to understand as a solution architect when going to the exam. It's that we need to speed up EC2 instances starting, or we need to speed up RDS databases or EDS volumes and formatting and all that kind of stuff. This is what you want to do using Golden AMI, user data, database snapshots, and EDS snapshots. So it's helpful. Hope that makes sense for you, and I will see you in the next lecture. Okay, so now let's talk about.
E aqui um exemplo que mostra uma típica arquitetura three-tier. As soluções padrão, né, de sistemas que têm os mesmos problemas a serem resolvidos, como resistência a desastre, escala para múltiplos acessos, escalar o banco de dados, cache, segurança e tudo mais, que são Elastic Load Balancer, a instância EC2, Autoscale Group, múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade no Elastic Load Balancer, a divisão de subnet pública, subnet privada, subnet de dados, Elastic Cache para fazer o cache, armazenar dados de sessão, dados de cache, RDS Read Replica e tudo mais. Então, o que podemos fazer a partir daqui?
Elastic Beanstalk. So far in this course, when we've been deploying an application, we've had the same architecture. So we have a load balancer that is taking all the requests from our users, and then we have an auto-scaling group with multiple availability zones, and in each AZ there will be some EC2 instances being deployed there. And then in the backend, we have maybe some data subnets. So we have an RDS database to take the reads and the writes, maybe we want some replicas and so on. And then in the caching layer, we need to look at Elastic Cache, okay? So if there are so many applications for us to deploy and they follow the same architecture, it may be a pain to recreate it every single time. So as a developer, it's complicated to manage infrastructure, to deploy code, we don't want to be configuring all the databases, the load balancer, etc. And of course, we want everything to be scalable. So as you can see, most of the web applications will have the same architecture with a load balancer and an auto-scaling group. And
então, problemas do desenvolvedor na AWS. Gerenciar a infraestrutura, fazer o deploy de código, configurar banco, load balancer, questões de escala, e muitas aplicações têm a mesma arquitetura. E para desenvolver vários sistemas com arquitetura parecida, o desenvolvedor acaba tendo que fazer várias vezes a mesma coisa em diferentes aplicações. Então, como que isso pode ser resolvido? Ele vai mostrar aqui.
So also, if
eu sei que ele vai falar, né, mas
vamos que seguir way of deploying my application. And this is where Beanstalk comes into play. So Beanstalk gives a developer-centric view of deploying an application on AWS. The idea is that from one single interface, it's going to reuse all the components we had before as a chat.
Que é o Elastic Beanstalk. O Elastic Beanstalk, ele usa todos os componentes que já foram vistos anteriormente. De uma forma gerenciada, ele faz tudo isso automático para você. Provisionando load balancer, escala, monitoramento da saúde da aplicação, configuração de instância, e você só é responsável pelo código do desenvolvimento, tipo o Heroku. E você continua com controle sobre toda a configuração. Só que tem um problema, né? Fazer isso com o Elastic Beanstalk ele é mais caro do que você fazer manualmente. Então é uma troca que você faz, ou você paga menos e vai configurando tudo, ou então você vai usar o Elastic Beanstalk, vai ficar mais caro e ele vai fazer isso para você.
Has EC2, ASG, ELB, RDS, but it's going to be a managed service that will deploy all these things for you. So it will handle the capacity provisioning, it will handle the configuration load balancer, the scaling, the application health monitoring, the instance configuration, and so on. And the only responsibility for you as a developer is going to be the code itself, okay? You still have full control over the configuration of each component, but at least they come bundled as one single interface in Beanstalk. And the idea is that Beanstalk also has a really cool way of updating applications. So the Beanstalk service is free on its own, but you're going to pay for the underlying instances that are going to be leveraged by Beanstalk or your ASG or your ELB, this kind of things. So components of Beanstalk consist of an application, which is a collection of Beanstalk components such as environments, versions, and configurations. A version of the application itself is an iteration of your application code, so you can have version 1, version 2, version 3, etc., etc. Then environments, it's just a collection of your resources running the specific application version, so you can only have one application version at a time in an environment, but we can actually update an application version within an environment from version 1 to version 2. We have tiers, so we can have two different tiers in Beanstalk. We have the web server environment tier and the worker environment tier. We'll see this very quickly. And we can also create multiple environments in Beanstalk, such as dev, test, and pro. And whatever environment manually. So the process is to create an application, then we upload a version, then we are going to launch an environment, and then we're going to manage the environment lifecycle.
Pode criar múltiplos ambientes.
Again in our environment to update our application stack. So Beanstalk supports many programming languages such as Go, Java, C, Java, Tomcat, .NET Core Linux, .NET Core Windows Server, Node.js, PHP, Python, Ruby, Packer Builder, single level
Suporta
container,
múltiplas linguagens.
So the idea is that on Beanstalk you should be able to deploy pretty much anything. Now, to finish, what do I mean by server tier and worker tier? Well, the web tier is looking like this. This is the traditional architecture that we know, where we have a load balancer, and then it's sending traffic to an auto-scaling group that has multiple EC2 instances that are going to be web servers. This is the architecture number 1 with Beanstalk, and the architecture number 2 with Beanstalk is going to be around the worker environment. So this time, there's no client accessing directly to EC2 instances. We're going to use an SGSQ, which is a message queue, and the message will be sent into the SGSQ, and the EC2 instances are going to be workers because they're going to pull messages from the SGSQ to process them. And in this case, the worker environment is going to scale based on the number of SGSQs, so more messages, more EC2 instances, and then the cool thing is that you can put the web environment and the worker environment together, by having the web environment push some messages into the SGSQ of the worker environment. Finally, there are two deployment modes you can do for Beanstalk. The first one is a single instance, which is great for development purposes. In this case, you'll have one EC2 instance, which will have
Aqui os modos de deploy do Elastic Beanstalk. Pode ser uma única instância, que é bom para desenvolvimento. Ele não escala, né? Só para fazer teste, para desenvolver. E o de alta disponibilidade com load balancer, que é para produção, que usa toda aquela arquitetura. A instância acessória, load balancer, bancos de dados replicados.
An Elastic IP, potentially you can also launch an RDS database and so on, but it's all based on one instance with an Elastic IP. It's great for development purposes, but then if you wanted to scale a real Elastic Beanstalk mode, then you would go for high availability with load balancer, which is great for production environments, in which case you can have a load balancer distributing the loads across multiple EC2 instances that are managed for an auto-scaling group and multiple availability zones. And finally, you may have an RDS database that's also multi-AZ with a master and a standby. All right, that's it. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice using the Beanstalk service. So I'm going to go into the Elastic Beanstalk console, and we're going to create our first application. So we have an option to choose either a web server environment or a worker environment. So right now, I want to run a website, so we'll choose web server environment. But if we want to process tasks out of the queue, then we'll choose a worker environment. But we will only do web server. So let's create an application, and this one is called My Application. Okay. So next, we scroll down, and we have environment information. So the environment is on field, but I'm just going to call this one My Application Dev, because this is going to represent my development environment.
Então
So the main
vamos
name is
agora
generated
responder as
for my application, and
questões.
this is how I will access my web servers. Okay. So we scroll down, and now we need to choose a platform. So this platform is going to be managed, and I will choose Node.js, and then I will just choose the default options. You may see something different than me, but by using the latest defaults, you should be fine and good to go. Next, we need to choose some application code. So we'll use a sample application. We can definitely put our own code, but we don't have that right now. And so this sample application will be matching the environment I have right here. Okay, so let's go down. We have presets, and Beanstalk can be quite complicated for the configuration, and as such, we can set recommended values for either single instance, which is free tier eligible, or high availability, where we have a load balancer, for example, or custom configuration if you want to customize everything. Now, to keep things simple, we're going to go over single instance. So click on next. And next, we have a tricky bit. We need to configure the service access. So it's the IAM roles that will allow Beanstalk to do what it needs to do. So it's very simple. We can just go ahead and create a new service role, and this will create the Elastic Beanstalk service role. Now, I think that right now it's a new console, so there may be a bug, and this is not pre-filled. So we need to go ahead and create manually the EC2 instance profile. So as such, I'm going to go into the IAM console. And on the left-hand side, I will go into roles, and I will create a role. And it's for a service, it's for EC2. You click on next. Then for permission policy, you just filter and you type in Beanstalk. And you need to add the web tier, the worker tier, and the multi-container Docker. This should be enough to get started. So we click on next. And then for the role name, enter AWS, then Elastic Beanstalk EC2 role with hyphens in between. Okay, so now we go ahead and we create this role. And this role right here is going to be the one we're using in Beanstalk. So I'll go back here, I refresh this, and as you can see, it got pre-filled. So the AWS Elastic Beanstalk EC2 role. So once you've done that, you're good to go. If you click on next, you would have to go over networking and database and instance traffic scaling, all these kind of things, but they're optional. And right now, what we're going to do is just click on skip to review, because we just want to use the default that were set for the single instance mode. So make sure on the service access that you do have the service role and the EC2 instance profile selected. And when you're good to go, you can definitely look at those, but they're complicated. Click on submit, and this will go and create our first Beanstalk environment. So now if you scroll down under events, as you can see, some events are happening. And these events actually come from a service called CloudFormation. So if you go into the CloudFormation console, we can see our Elastic Beanstalk stack right here. So I'm going to just go on the right-hand side and make it bigger. So under events, if you're thinking fast enough, you will still see that stuff is being created in progress. And then when stuff is done being created, it goes to create complete. So this is the line of events of all the things happening within your CloudFormation template and all the things that have been created by CloudFormation. CloudFormation is a service we'll see later on. But here on the resources, we can see we have created a node-scaling group, we have created a log configuration, and so on, and Elastic IP and so on. One thing you can look at is under templates, you can view the template in Application Composer. And the cool thing about it is that we can visually see what is being created by CloudFormation. So we can see, for example, that we have a log configuration, we have security groups, we have an Elastic IP, a wait condition, and a condition handle. So this is very handy to start visualizing what Elastic Beanstalk is creating for us behind the scenes. So now let's go back into Elastic Beanstalk. So in the events tab, as you can see now, we have some information. For example, a security group was created, and then an Elastic IP was created. Then we wait for the EC2 instances to launch, and then the instances will be created. So if I switch now and I go under EC2, the EC2 console, and look at my instances running, actually, yes, one of my instances is running. It's using a T3 micro, and as you can see, this instance has a public IP address right here. And if I go on the left-hand side under Elastic IPs, we can see that this Elastic IP address was created and is allocated to our EC2 instance. And if I go under autoscaling groups, we can see that an autoscaling group was created, and this autoscaling group under instance management is managing my only EC2 instance. That's why it's called a single EC2 instance. So all of this makes sense, and that's what Beanstalk is created. And at the end of it, when everything is launched, you'll say, okay, successfully launched, and it will be okay for help. And what we get out of it is the domain name. So if I click on this domain name and open it in a new tab, I get actually access to my Beanstalk environment and my single EC2 instance, and it says, congratulations, you are now running Elastic Beanstalk on this EC2 instance, which is amazing. So you can see, very simply, Beanstalk was creating for us just from the code, the sample code that we were using. It generated all the infrastructure to start successfully my application, my web server, which is very, very good. So now let's have a look at a couple of options. So if we wanted to upload a new version, we click on here, we can upload a new version, and automatically it would be deployed to my EC2 instances. So we don't have that, but just to give you an overview. Health gives you some information around the health checks of all your instances if you have many. You can go under logs to view the logs of your application. You can go under monitoring to have a look at all the metrics for your application. So we get really like some view-centric around all my application itself. The alarms, manage updates, which is when Beanstalk decides to update our entire environment. And then if you click on configuration, you can actually have a look at all the configuration of your Beanstalk environment, modify them and apply them, which are quite well-rounded, but we don't need to know about this right now. Now, more importantly, if we go under my application, as you can see right here, there's my application dev, that's one environment, but I could go ahead and create a second environment, for example, my application prod, and that will allow us to really think about environments overall. So that's it for an overview of Beanstalk. So to reason about it, Beanstalk is centered around code and environments for your code, whereas if you want to look at CloudFormation, the service we have seen before, CloudFormation is used to deploy stacks arbitrarily with any kind of infrastructure. So we've seen all that Beanstalk has created, including my autoscaling group, my EC2 instance, the Elastic IP, and so on. And so if you are in a course that has more Beanstalk lectures, such as, for example, the Certified Developer course, then do not delete your application, we'll be using it more. But if you are done with the Beanstalk lectures, you know enough for the exam. So what you can do is take your application, do action, and then delete application, and then we'll have cleanup. So that's it. Make your own call, and I will see you in the next lecture.
Well,
Então chegou até o final desse, mas tem outro aqui que completa esse no mesmo assunto que esse fala, que é o que nós vamos dar prosseguimento agora, que é, é o que utiliza serverless na solução de alguns casos de uso diferentes, como sites como MyBlog, MyToDoList, e fala também sobre arquitetura de microserviços e como fazer distribuição de updates de software. Então, como esse, eu acho que poderia estar até no mesmo módulo, porque trata de temas como arquitetura de software, então ele é bastante complementar a ele, então eu gostaria de já ir direto para ele. Então, vou dar aqui para bastante conteúdo aqui de S3, S2, Load Balancer, Elastic Beanstalk, múltiplas zonas de disponibilidade, Glacier, filas, serverless, machine learning, inteligência artificial, segurança, tem muitos slides. Se eu fizer a busca, fazer uma busca por algum deles. MyBlog. Achei. Arquitetura serverless.